responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty. You want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a first-time visitor tonight. Mike from RethinkingTheDollar.com is here with us on Reluctant Preppers. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Dunagun, thank you for having me on your show. Been a long-time viewer of yours, so it's an honor to join you. So thank you for having me.
Well, I've been enjoying some of the topics that you've been covering, and it's a wide variety, and you really take it down to the people's level and address many topics that people they absolutely are not going to find out about in school. They're not going to find out about in the evening news. They're not even going to find out about in the financial news. This is stuff that you're exposing so that people can really be aware and prepare to make appropriate choices in their lives to protect themselves. And that's why we wanted to have you on. So thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of the many topics you've dealt with recently, one of them that's really caught my eye is that regarding to retirement and pension plans. A surprising number of our audience are having to seriously look at preparing for retirement. It can come up a lot faster than people think, and wanting to make sure that people are aware of some of the forces that are arrayed against them in that, and some of the pitfalls if they just follow kind of the herd mentality and just go with conventional wisdom of what we've been told. So if you could kind of walk us through what you consider to be some of the biggest misconceptions or false ideas that get propagated in people just going through the motions as wage slaves and tax slaves and just preparing for that someday. What risks are people really up against, and how can people make wiser choices to take better care of themselves and their families as they approach retirement age?
All right, very, very good questions there. So I'm going to try to break it down and go back a little bit and give you some of the background as to how I actually came across in the importance of this subject matter. So as I get older, I'm almost 40 years old, and so it's becoming of importance to me because years ago during my college years, when I graduated college, I received a generous gift from a family member. And at that point, the information was that if you take this sum of money, you deposit it, it'll help you along your way as far as the retirement aspect. And so I would deposit the money, and along with a family stockbroker or a family friend who happened to be a stockbroker. And just a long story short, I invested money into Bear Stearns, and I kept my eye on Bear Stearns up until the Great Recession, which occurred, which wiped away Bear Stearns altogether. And there goes my little graduation gift. So after having lost at an early age, it really got me to rethink the idea of, exactly what is retirement, what is a pension, what is 401k, what are all these things that we're encouraged to do, but never really taught or told what it's about. So that led me to just diving into a variety of books and subject matter on uncovering what the whole concept of retirement is. And from a spiritual standpoint, being a Christian, I never really saw the words retirement in the Bible. And so that really got me to wonder, is this some type of man-made 21st century, 20th century idea? And so it led me down a rabbit hole of really studying about retirement. And so for those that I'm sure are aware, but just to give you an idea, the subject matter came about as an experiment, or as a more of a escape route for a situation that happened in Germany approximately 130, 140 years ago. So it was never really intended to actually be a long-term solution for people to depend upon for their livelihood. And so factor in now we're in the 21st century now, and we're in that whole 401k retirement era, and being of the younger generation, we are really encouraged to put aside money to save. But yet, since the Great Recession, the typical vehicle that has been used for retirement purposes is no longer reliable and steady. So I tell people a lot of times that, if you don't take action now and becoming more proactive in your education to be able to make smarter decisions on how you would prefer to handle your money, you stand the risk of losing it all if you allow the algorithms or some type of financial institution that is not really operating in your best interest. So you stand to lose a lot in the long run. And so that's why I really encourage education and understanding the importance of being more of a active and not a passive investor, as well as just a student of this monetary system in general. So that's kind of how I arrived here in a nutshell.
Well, that can be, I completely agree with everything you just said. And one of the things that's concerning to us is when we have family members who are either in retirement already or are approaching that, and they talk to us about, what are my options? What else can I do? Because all they hear from their people that they ask is, you put your money into a 401k or an IRA and you just invest it in the overall market, and it grows. They expect to average somewhere between 7 and 10 to 12% a year compounded growth. They say no matter what happens, if it goes up, goes down, you just keep putting it in, let time averaging work for you and all that sort of thing. And that's all they've been told, and that's all they know. And you said education is the key, but it can be so bewilderingly complex once you get far beyond that people just throw up their hands and go, I can't understand it. I'm just going to trust my broker, as you had said once upon a time. So how do you get beyond that very first step of saying this is impossibly complicated? What parts about it are not impossibly complicated that people can really and need to understand?
Right. Very good question there. A very good point there. So one of the things that is a great door opener, I believe, is just is covering a variety of subject matters in other countries. And so by us being the United States of America, predominantly most of the viewers, we have been very blessed and privileged for the last several decades to experience life at a level that most of the world does not have the privilege of experiencing. And so there's all types of events happening outside this country, which will not be covered on the mainstream news. But yet you cover them, I cover them, and it's all to do with areas such as Venezuela, Argentina now, Venezuela, Zimbabwe. And so a variety of countries around this planet are all experiencing issues. And at the foundation of that is the same thing that we're experiencing here. Too much debt, too big of a government, and too many promises that are not able to be met at the very time that they're due. And so just sharing with information with people on what's happening in those type of countries would open up the idea that they'll be able to listen for a second. But at the end of the day, most people are pretty much just too comfortable, distracted by just the day-to-day grind of trying to make it, nevertheless really concern themselves about their own future. So if I can't get them to open up their eyes based upon circumstances happening in other countries, then more than likely, unfortunately, it's usually a situation where most people wait to the last minute when something such as the Great Recession happens or whatnot. So it's a very complicated matter to get people to open their eyes up to. But I use examples on other countries, which I think most of the times tend to work for me. So hopefully that reaches to most of the people.
Yeah, so I can definitely see how that would help them to wake up, to pay some attention, to take it seriously. But these are for people who are already kind of concerned that they're paying enough attention to realize, like, interest rates, like someone who says I'm not getting anything on my certificates of deposit anymore. I can't get any of my fixed incomes going down the drain, and can't keep up with the cost of living, that kind of thing. So they're concerned. They're already concerned, and they also feel that from what they hear, they get conflicting stories of the stock market bull run is longer than any other one in history, except for perhaps one other time, and they think it may be overplayed. So they're thinking, how do we reduce risk? But they say, well, normally the way to reduce risk is to pull money out of the stock market and stick it into some savings account or some bonds or some certificates or some stuff. And everybody says, no, none of that's safe. None of that's safe. So I guess if you could walk it back for us to what you've talked about recently on how I don't know if I want to say corrupt, but certainly misleading the prospects are for people in the pension and retirement funds and that kind of thing. What is it that they need to know that they aren't hearing about their typical retirement vehicles that they're being told are things they should plan towards?
Right. And I think the answer to that question there has to do with monetary awareness, basically understanding the foundations of what money is and what money has been throughout the last several hundred or thousand years or so. An idea that all the financial instruments that we've been encouraged to utilize for retirement's sake or just the conventional investing usage case are all designed to keep the Federal Reserve note and the digital dollars, because there's more dollars in digital form than actually is paper. They're all designed to keep them in the system with the idea that if you write out the volatility in the stock market or whatnot, that in time you'll be able to continue to grow your investment with the concept of compounding interest. But yet, once again, to go back to the whole Great Recession, in my opinion, I believe that was the ending point of what would be considered conventional, sound financial advice that most people could conceive or receive, rather, because after the Great Recession, Federal Reserve and our government have taken on policies that we could have never imagined. Everything from the whole QE, zero interest rates that you hinted at. And so all those things have never been done before, especially in modern history. So I believe that we're at the front of the greatest monetary experiment in human history. And so listening, in my opinion, this is all, of course, my opinion, not able to give financial advice, but in my opinion, listening to the mainstream narrative still in an environment where we're supposed to be in an economic expansion can be dangerous, especially when taking into fact all the things happening around us. And so if you continue to practice the same type of financial practices prior to the Great Recession, when normal interest rates were 5-6% and you were actually able to put money in your bank account and actually receive interest, most people never really taken the fact that ever since the Great Recession happened, we went from receiving interest to now utilizing the whole cash back model where, you don't receive interest, but yet you get cash back when you swipe your card. And so I would have never imagined 10 years ago, plus 10 years ago, that you would have to spend money in order to so-called make money back. So that right there is one of the examples of just unprecedented monetary practices, which is what we're experiencing now. So in my opinion, the conventional financial advice went out the window when the Great Recession happened, because everything since then has been designed to keep this narrative of just park your money, let it grow, and all the things of that nature. When because of inflation, which we're going to experience sooner or later, I believe that we're going to be experiencing something called compound inflation, because we're well beyond that 2% mandate that the Federal Reserve claims to be shooting for. And so once the truth is unveiled, and then I think most people will really feel the pinch and wish they would have taken action just as far as educating themselves first, and then looking at alternative means of storing their wealth. Because at the end of the day, it's all about wealth preservation, being able to retain the energy and everything that you've worked for your entire life, to be able to transfer it as we move on to this next system, which I believe is coming after this next recession, which, as I mentioned in a short ebook, I mentioned how this next recession could be our very last, because there's no way of continuing this whole debt model that we're a part of. So education is one. Two, alternative means of storing your wealth is the best way, in my opinion.
You've spoken quite a bit recently about pension plans and retirement plans. Can you talk to us about what your concerns are, why people need to be concerned about the viability, the financial stability, how the demographics are going to play out? If you could talk to us, talk about Social Security, talk about private pension plans, talk about retirement accounts, that sort of thing.
All right, now, very good point there. So in my opinion, after having done a variety of videos from covering both locally as well as international subject matters, the whole idea of pensions and just retirement vehicles in general are under threat because of the monetary policy that's been implemented since 08-09. And so a lot of the hedge fund managers, as well as just people who are protecting and supposed to be growing the funds for a lot of people in their portfolios, they're struggling right now to basically meet those gains of, as you hinted at earlier, 7.5% or so is what they were told. But in actuality, because of this whole monetary crisis we're in now, with the idea of banks around the world printing a massive amount of counterfeit money, that's technically what it is. So it's really distorted reality as far as, how can you actually value what currency is at this point? Nevertheless, try to put it into something for it to grow. And so a lot of hedge funds, portfolios of all natures is really missing out. And then you factor in from a pension standpoint, when it comes to the public sector, with all the states and things of that nature well underfunded, it's a matter of, will people be able to receive what was promised to them? And even though, in my opinion, the promises that were made to individuals that's entering to the retirement age was done years and years ago in a system, in a time where monetary policy wasn't as problematic as it is now. And so now the bill is due to where a lot of people, I believe, are going to come up on the short end of the retirement, opportunity to be able to receive, because they never factored in the idea that at this point we'd be at 0 or 1% interest rate or whatever it is now. And with them talking about quantitative tightening as well as hiking interest rates and all the things that we're a part of in this experiment, it's really going to put pressure on fund managers and people who are in charge of portfolios to be able to live up to those promises of managing those funds. So I believe in the long term, it's going to be a problem, because there's going to be someone left out. And unfortunately, the banks will never be on the short end of the stick. So it's going to have to be those that are expecting. And so it's well worth people's interest to take matters into their own hands, or leave it up to the financial powers that be to do it for them. And like the Great Recession from before, no one will operate in your best interest other than yourself. So it's worth your while to really become more proactive education and exploring new options, of course, beyond precious metals or whatnot, because those are the anchor and those are the true insurance policy to our national currency in general, but yet being able to preserve and hopefully grow. There should be other ways that you can do that as well through investments of all types.
There was a story just in the last couple of weeks here coming out of Sears Roebuck closing in Canada, and the employees who had expected to have retirement pension benefits not basically get left out in the cold. And I think there was like $2 billion worth of liabilities that Sears had, and they only had like $150 million in liquid assets or something. So there was a lawsuit from the employees saying, well, telling the judge, at least take that $150 million and spread it out among us 14,000 employees that are left cold without a retirement. But that, as big box stores, is just one of the victims of the changing economies and changing times and monetary policies and so on. So people, you've written recently about and spoken about other structural instabilities in pension plans in general. Is there anything else about that people need to be aware of, whether it's I don't know if it's Chicago or California, or what you mentioned a couple other municipal pensions that are in trouble?
Yeah, and so just to take it even further, as a good example of what could happen here, in my local city is Detroit. And so years ago, I think it was 2011 or so, around that time frame, the city of Detroit here ran into a problem where there was a lot more that was expected to be paid in regards to pensions for retired city workers. And so at the end of the day, long story short, the money wasn't there. They weren't able to borrow any more because they were already up to their eyeballs in debt. And so they're basically the city of Detroit, the people who spent 20, 30 years of their life serving our great city of Detroit here, end up having to take a haircut. And I'm not sure, because it was never really fully publicized as to what people were able to actually get out of the deal. But yet, once Detroit went through the whole bankruptcy process, a lot of people came up short. And so I'm sure a lot of people had to readjust their future plans, given that they based their entire lives upon being able to retire comfortably and enjoy the latter part of their lives with some type of cushion of financially, but yet that all changed. And so to take it on even to a bigger level, we have, various states, especially in the Midwest. We have Illinois, and of course, everyone knows about Chicago. We have Kentucky. We have Connecticut. I just wrote about recently where they are in the same situation there, and then California. So there's a variety of states here that are all experiencing the pinch, simply because years and years ago, promises were made without consideration on how that was actually going to be repaid or how that was going to be paid. And the idea that now, because of monetary policy, all those plans have been interrupted because the younger generation now are feeling the side effects of the policy now, to where we're no longer able to really contribute into Social Security and to the taxes in general to keep up with this, Ponzi nature of a system that we're in. So unfortunately, a lot of people who are expecting will, because if you tally up all the debt that's outstanding and the obligations that's due, there's no way of meeting any of that, to where there's something have to give, and unfortunately it might be on the retirees side of things, which is unfortunate. So that's one of the reasons I covered so much, because a lot of people still have time to take action. I mean, I can't tell you what to do, but once you're aware, I think that, what would be considered common sense, or what has been uncommon sense, might become a little bit more understandable, to where you can say, hey, something's not right. I may not be able to receive something that has purchasing power for the remainder of my life. Let me take action now. So that's why I tend to cover this subject matter so heavily, I believe.
So that's one of the things that we've talked about with family members, and others on our channel have asked, is what are the options available? And we've walked through a variety of things. Oftentimes we come back to, for example, physical precious metals as one option that has been stood the test of time. But people have talked about the stock market, and it's hard to ignore that the stock market has been making, huge advances. I mean, even if you look at the S&P or the NASDAQ chart, even this year, which has been a disruption to its upward progress, it just seems like it refuses to yield to go down, and people fear the consequences, given that they know inflation is really driving up is eroding their purchasing power, and they don't want to be left with eroding purchasing power, so they want to find some way to keep up. So can you talk to us a little bit about what people can do to try to keep up and not lose their purchasing power in the future from what they've saved?
All right, very, very good, very good point there. Oh man, that's a very, because I want to say one thing I've been covering a lot on my channel is the idea of just exploring the whole blockchain technology. And so we're in a day and age where unfortunately we're going to be going digital solely, in my opinion, as time goes on, just because there's always been a big push to remove cash from our physical possession. So I've never been an actual proponent of one to say cryptocurrencies would be a viable solution because it's so new. But yet, at a time where the stock market is surely inflated, beyond means, and then we factor in what just happened recently with Facebook losing $120 billion. And so a lot of the leading companies that we pretty much measure the stock market by and through are all digital companies that don't actually produce tangible goods anymore. So we're entering into a digital age. And so I believe that, right now, especially if you are open to exploring new opportunities, the blockchain is a good way to dip and dabble and more so speculate because it's early. But yet, over the last, several years of me studying into that information there and that technology, it's been quite rewarding to be able to diversify out of dollars into this, into that sector and be able to receive some type of gains, which in my opinion is only going to go up because, not to really promote any particular coin, but yet if the very first coin is Bitcoin. And if you look at Bitcoin over the last 10 years, going from basically a penny or less to even 8,000 right now, which is well off its high of 20,000, it has appreciated in value as far as purchasing power more than the Federal Reserve note has. And so even though that's a 10-year window I'm measuring it with, but yet with all the things happening now with the push to get the pension funds and retirement aspect money into that sector, it's just a matter of time before I believe it reaches that old high and exceeds that. And then the question will be when it comes to the stock market, what will all those people do who have their portfolios that's heavily invested in stocks? They're going to be missing out on that crypto gain. So I can see them pulling some of that out to get into the crypto sector. So as a way of diversifying, I believe that, the technology with the blockchain and all the cryptocurrencies and the startup companies that's coming from that might be worthy of your time and effort just to learn about it. And of course, do as you can afford, but the technology is not going anywhere. So I myself am spending more time studying the blockchain and things of that nature because I believe it's something that's going to be around and it could be a viable option for a lot of people if they're interested in learning more for themselves, of course.
So let's take it back to the individual then. You mentioned speculative gains in cryptocurrencies might be one avenue that people could consider. It certainly may not be the main avenue for them, although you're pointing out that these retirees who are looking at reduced fixed income options aren't alone in if the fund holders that are managing these pension plans are looking at the same problem and they're going to try to solve that problem. You're pointing out that some of those pension managers may go into the crypto space and they're bringing a lot of dollar dragging behind them, and that might be this huge tide lifting all boats in that area, or maybe not all, but many boats.
Right.
What other avenues should people consider to reduce risk and to take care of business for their own selves and for their families to protect what they've worked for?
Right. Very good point. And so one of my main things that I tell people is to really, and it goes back to the spiritual nature of, really uncovering your gifting. Like everyone is here on earth, in my opinion, to do something unique, to do something special. And I believe right now is the time to find out what that is, because no one will ever take care of you or look out for you more than you're willing to do for yourself. So right now will be a great time for entrepreneurship to really come alive in a lot of people's lives, because there's a demand and there's a need from everybody on this planet to work together in some form, especially as we go through this monetary restructuring process where everyone can find an area or a niche that they can serve other people in, will always make you of value to someone and will help you thrive in the days ahead as you look to diversify yourself by using your talents first. And then from there, you can have some income and whatnot that can allow you to dip and dabble in various things. But yet at the very core of everything, I've always been a big proponent of silver, just because, when you look at the silver to gold ratio, it's beyond cheap right now, and it can't get any cheaper to where there's no way that you can't protect yourself with the acquiring of precious metals as well as other metals that can be utilized in a monetary sense. But definitely education and utilizing your gifts for entrepreneurship is the primary way, I believe, to really get started, especially in the days ahead, as your services, whatever it is, more likely will be needed.
Well, Mike, before we let you go, would you like to take a chance to to educate our viewers on how they can find you on the web, what they'll find when they come after the materials that you have out there, and how they can subscribe for more.
Right. Well, Duncan, thank you once again for having me on your show. As I mentioned, been a longtime fan, so it's an honor to be with you here. So if you want to interested in find out about Rethinking the Dollar and the variety of subject matters I cover, rethinkingthedollar.com is my website. And then if you're on YouTube, RTD, Rethinking the Dollar is a YouTube channel where I have, we've interviewed a lot of the same guests. And so it's always great to get different angles from a variety of people. And so I have news updates as well as a live stream in the evenings. And so wrote a couple ebooks out there that give some of the basic education that is more so for those that have no monetary background or no financial literacy whatsoever. Because I think we were all, educated at a disadvantage because this subject matter, which is the second or third most important subject matter in our lives,
right,
was not taught to us. So,
and what is taught to us is really can be as misleading as it can be informative.
Very much so. And I learned for myself personally, the older I get and the more proactive I become in my own education, I've learned more than I've actually learned in college. So, taking the time to just open your eyes up to a variety of subject matters and expose yourself to as much as you can will definitely give you something to fall back on the days ahead. So
we've been speaking with Mike, who is from rethinkingthedollar.com, about pension plans and retirement and things we need to be aware of. Mike, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.